It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and everything seemed normal in the small suburban neighborhood. John, a man in his early 30s, was finishing up a long day at work. He had been looking forward to coming home, parking his car in the garage, and relaxing with a cold drink. It had been a stressful week, and all he wanted was a little peace. As he turned into his driveway, John noticed something strange. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But no, it wasn't a trick. There, right in front of his garage, were 3 big trucks. They were parked side by side, completely blocking the entrance. There was no way he could move his car in or out. John stopped his car and stared. "What the?" he muttered under his breath. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The trucks were real. And they were not just parked randomly. They were arranged in a way that made it absolutely impossible for him to open his garage. He stepped out of his car, trying to stay calm. He looked at the trucks. They were large, white, and looked brand new. It was obvious someone had planned this. The question was, who? And why? As John approached the first truck, he noticed a note taped to the windshield. He picked it up carefully and read it. The note said, "This is to remind you of the HOA rules. Park better next time." John's heart sank. He knew exactly who had done this. It had to be Karen, the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Karen was known in the neighborhood for being strict, bossy, and always watching everyone's moves. She had complained about small things before: lawn heights, trash cans, even decorations. But John had never expected her to go this far. He looked up and saw Karen standing by her window across the street. She was glaring at him, arms crossed, looking very satisfied with herself. Her lips moved, and he could barely hear her say, "This is what happens when you don't follow the rules." John took a deep breath. He was frustrated, confused, and a little angry. He had never had a problem with Karen before. He always followed the HOA rules, or at least tried to. So why now? Why block his garage with 3 trucks? He decided to approach her. Walking slowly, he kept his voice calm. "Karen," he called out. "Can we talk about this? I really need to get into my garage." Karen didn't even look surprised. In fact, she looked proud. "John," she said sharply, "this is for your own good. You need to follow the rules. Consider this a warning." John's frustration grew. "A warning? Karen, you can't block someone's garage. That's not legal," he said, trying to reason with her. Karen shook her head. "I know the rules better than anyone. You'll understand soon." John wanted to argue more, but he could see Karen wasn't going to move. The trucks were parked perfectly, and she seemed completely confident that she had won this small battle. He went back to his car, thinking fast. He couldn't stay calm forever. He needed a solution. Calling the HOA office seemed like the first step, but he had a feeling they might take Karen's side. He didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain: he couldn't leave his garage blocked. As he stood there, he noticed some neighbors looking from their windows. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other. John could feel their eyes on him, but no one dared to intervene. Everyone knew Karen's reputation. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the driveway. The 3 trucks looked even more intimidating now. John's frustration mixed with a little fear. He knew Karen could make things very difficult if she wanted to. And right now, it felt like she wanted to. He walked around the trucks, checking if there was any way to move even one of them. But it was useless. They were too heavy, too big, and perfectly placed. The reality sank in: this was not just a prank or a small problem. This was a serious blockade. John leaned against his car and took a deep breath. He thought about the next steps. He could call the HOA, but Karen was the president. He could try to reason with her again, but she seemed determined. That left only one other option. Little did John know, this was just the beginning. Karen had more plans, and the situation was about to get even more complicated. What started as a normal day was turning into a real-life battle between a neighbor and the HOA president. John looked at the trucks one more time. His mind was racing. "I need to find a way," he whispered to himself. "I can't let this go." The tension in the air was heavy. The audience could feel it too, something big was coming. And the question hung in the air, what would John do next? Would he find a way to get his garage back, or would Karen win this battle completely? The scene ended with John standing in front of the trucks, looking determined. The camera pans slowly from his frustrated face to the massive trucks blocking the garage, leaving the audience with a chilling thought: this is only the beginning. The next morning, John woke up with the memory of the 3 trucks still fresh in his mind. His garage was still blocked, and his frustration had not faded. But something had changed overnight. He felt a strange mix of determination and curiosity. He couldn't let Karen control his life like this. Not anymore. As he sipped his coffee, he stared at the driveway through the kitchen window. The trucks were still there, exactly as they had been yesterday. Karen's face appeared at her window again, peeking out just enough to make her presence known. It was almost like she was daring him. John knew he had to face her. But he also knew Karen was no ordinary neighbor. She was fierce, stubborn, and loved winning arguments more than anything else. The thought made John take a deep breath and gather his courage. He stepped outside and walked toward her house, careful to keep his tone calm. "Karen," he called politely, though his voice carried a hint of frustration. Karen stepped outside immediately, almost like she had been waiting for him. "Ah, John. I see you're finally coming to talk." "Good," she said, her voice sharp and confident. John tried to keep his cool. "Karen, can you please move the trucks? I need to get my car out of the garage. This is serious." Karen raised her eyebrows, a small smile forming on her lips. "Serious? Oh, John, you really need to learn about rules. Rules are serious. And you've been careless." John blinked, stunned by her calm but controlling tone. "Careless? I've done nothing wrong. This is insane. You can't just block someone's garage." Karen laughed softly, almost like it was a game. "Who said I can't? I'm making sure everyone follows the rules. That's my job. You should be thanking me for the lesson." John felt his patience slipping. "A lesson? Blocking my garage is not a lesson, Karen. It's harassment." Karen tilted her head and looked around, as if the whole street was listening. "Harassment? No, John. This is neighborhood management. You will understand eventually. Maybe after a few more reminders." John felt a mixture of frustration and disbelief. He had faced stubborn people before, but Karen was on another level. She had the confidence of someone who believed she could bend rules to her will. He tried a different approach. "Karen, I don't want to fight. I just want my garage free. We can talk, maybe find a solution?" Karen shook her head, smiling smugly. "Talk? John, you're too late. The trucks aren't going anywhere today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe later. Rules are rules." John looked around, hoping for some support from neighbors, but most were hiding behind curtains. No one wanted to cross Karen. He realized he was truly on his own. A small idea sparked in John's mind. He decided to record the conversation on his phone, just in case. Karen noticed him moving and raised an eyebrow. "Planning something, John? Better be careful." John kept his calm smile, hiding the tension building inside. "Just documenting, Karen. Just documenting." Karen waved him off. "Go ahead, John. It won't change anything." John walked back toward his driveway, thinking fast. He needed a bigger plan. Calling the HOA office might not help, since Karen could manipulate the situation. He needed evidence, proof that he was being blocked unfairly. As he looked at the 3 trucks, he noticed how perfectly Karen had arranged them. It wasn't random, it was intentional. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Karen had clearly thought this through. John also realized something else. This situation was starting to attract attention. Some neighbors had stepped outside quietly, curious but too afraid to intervene. It was like a small audience, silently watching the battle unfold between John and Karen. He took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and determined. "I can't let her win like this," he muttered under his breath. Karen, from her window, waved again. "Better watch yourself, John. Rules are serious, and so am I." Little did John know, this confrontation was just the first of many. Karen had more tricks up her sleeve, and the trucks were only the beginning. Something bigger was coming, and John had to be ready. The audience is left wondering, what will John do next? Will he manage to free his garage, or will Karen's stubbornness make this battle even more complicated? John woke up that morning with a plan, or so he thought. He had spent the previous evening pacing around his living room, replaying the confrontation with Karen in his mind. Her smug smile, her confident tone, the way she had waved from her window, it all haunted him. He knew he couldn't just give up, but he also realized that this was bigger than a simple neighbor dispute. After breakfast, he grabbed his phone and started drafting a message to the HOA office. He wanted to explain the situation calmly, clearly, and without sounding angry. But as soon as he hit send, he noticed the little spinning circle, and then a message popped up: "Your complaint has been received and is under review." John frowned. "Under review?" he muttered. He remembered how Karen had told him rules were serious, and now he realized she might have already twisted things in her favor. Deciding not to wait for the HOA, John tried another tactic. He went outside and knocked on a few neighbors' doors, hoping for some advice or support. Most smiled politely but shook their heads. "We've learned not to get involved with Karen," one neighbor whispered. "She's tricky." John felt a knot in his stomach. He wasn't used to being powerless. He thought, how can 3 trucks block my garage, and no one does anything? Frustration built inside him like a storm. He paced in front of the trucks, inspecting every angle, trying to find a way to squeeze his car in. But each time he looked, it seemed impossible. The trucks weren't just large, they were carefully positioned. Whoever had parked them knew exactly what they were doing. Then John remembered something his brother had once told him: when rules fail, evidence becomes your power. He quickly pulled out his phone and started taking photos and videos of the trucks. He recorded Karen's house in the background, her face occasionally peeking out from the window. Every angle, every detail, every note on the windshield, he documented it all. Hours passed, and still, nothing changed. John tried calling the HOA office again, explaining the situation verbally this time. But the response was frustratingly vague. "We'll look into it," they said. "Please be patient." Patience was not John's strong suit, and by now, it had run out. He felt trapped. Trapped in his own driveway, blocked by 3 trucks, powerless against Karen's stubbornness and control. As he stepped back to think, a small idea formed in his mind. Maybe he needed someone who could enforce the rules directly, someone with authority. The sheriff. But even as the thought crossed his mind, doubt crept in. Will the sheriff believe me? What if Karen convinces him otherwise? John sighed and leaned against his car, feeling the weight of the situation. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Every failed attempt had taught him one thing: Karen wasn't going to back down. And neither could he. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the driveway, stretching across the trucks like silent reminders of his struggle. John's frustration mixed with determination. He knew one thing for certain: he had to act, and he had to act wisely. Then, almost as if the universe was teasing him, Karen appeared again at her window. She waved casually, as if to say, "Good luck, John. You'll need it." John clenched his fists. This wasn't just about a garage anymore. It was a test of patience, courage, and strategy. And deep down, he felt a spark of excitement. For the first time, he realized that he had a plan forming, a plan that might just turn the tables. The audience is left on edge. Will John manage to gather the evidence and find a way to challenge Karen? Or will each attempt only make her more confident, more unstoppable? It was past sunset, and the street was quiet except for the occasional hum of a passing car. John sat in his living room, staring at the 3 trucks blocking his garage. The dim light from the kitchen barely lit the room, but it matched his mood, focused, tense, and a little bit anxious. He knew that talking to Karen again would get him nowhere. If he wanted to win this, he needed proof. Solid proof. John picked up his phone and started reviewing the videos he had taken earlier. He zoomed in on Karen's face at the window, the way she had smiled triumphantly as she watched him struggle. Every note on the trucks, every angle of the vehicles, he wanted it all recorded. This wasn't just documentation, this was his weapon. A thought struck him. What if Karen tried to claim the trucks were parked legally? What if she argued that she had permission or that the HOA approved her actions? John shook his head. I need timestamps, clear videos, and pictures of everything, he muttered to himself. He grabbed his small notebook and started writing down everything he could remember from the past 2 days. Each conversation, each interaction with Karen, every failed attempt to reach the HOA office, it all went into neat lines on the page. He was building a timeline, a story that could not be ignored. The next morning, John woke early. He didn't want to waste any time. He stepped outside with his camera and started filming again, this time like a detective on a mission. He recorded the trucks from every angle, zoomed in on the license plates, and even captured Karen at her window, checking if he was still watching. Karen noticed him and waved mockingly. Still at it, John? She called out. John didn't reply. Instead, he kept filming, careful to stay calm and composed. He knew that if he lost his temper, it would weaken his case. This wasn't about arguing anymore, it was about facts, evidence, and strategy. He also started asking neighbors subtle questions, taking notes without revealing too much. Did you notice the trucks yesterday? He asked casually. Most gave short answers, but every small detail added to his growing collection of evidence. John could feel the pieces coming together, like a puzzle he was determined to solve. Hours passed, and John's confidence grew. He had footage, photos, notes, and even witness statements. It wasn't enough to confront Karen directly yet, but it was enough to show that he wasn't just angry, he had a valid case. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the driveway, John paused. He looked at the 3 trucks, still parked perfectly in front of his garage. The frustration of the past days lingered, but now it was mixed with a sense of control. For the first time, he felt that he had a plan that could actually work. He leaned against his car, thinking. Calling the sheriff had been an idea before, but now he realized he had to be smart. He needed the sheriff to see the whole picture, not just a frustrated neighbor. The evidence he had gathered could make all the difference. A cool breeze swept down the street, and the neighborhood seemed unusually quiet, as if holding its breath. John whispered to himself, tomorrow, I'll take the next step. And this time, I won't let her win. The audience is left on edge, knowing that the tension is building. John is prepared, gathered his evidence, and is ready to escalate. But the question remains, will the sheriff take his side, or will Karen's cunning find a way to twist the rules in her favor? The night was unusually quiet, almost too quiet. John sat in his car parked a few houses down from his driveway, the glow of his phone illuminating his determined face. The 3 trucks still blocked his garage like silent sentinels, and Karen's window above glowed faintly, hinting that she was watching. This was it, he had to escalate. There was no turning back. John's hands trembled slightly as he dialed the sheriff's office. He wasn't nervous about the law, he knew he was right, but the thought of Karen twisting the story in her favor made his stomach knot. Please, let this work, he whispered under his breath. The line clicked. Sheriff's office, how can I help you? John took a deep breath. Hello, my name is John. I'm calling about a situation at my home. 3 trucks are blocking my garage, and the homeowners association president, Karen, refuses to move them. I believe this is illegal obstruction. The sheriff's calm, professional voice reassured him. Can you tell me exactly where you are, sir? And are the trucks still blocking access? Yes, John said firmly. They're parked perfectly, no way to move my car. I've tried talking to her, documenting everything. I have photos and videos if needed. There was a pause on the line. We can send an officer to check the situation. Please stay at your home until someone arrives." John hung up and leaned back, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because finally, someone with authority would see the situation. Anxiety because Karen was clever, she might try to lie, argue, or even escalate her own tactics before the sheriff arrived. He glanced at the trucks again. The white trucks glimmered faintly in the streetlights, perfectly aligned, almost like a challenge. He imagined Karen waving from her window, whispering, "Good luck, John. Let's see how far you go." Determined, John grabbed his notebook and phone, double-checking the evidence he had gathered. Photos, videos, witness statements, all of it. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake could let Karen turn the story around. Minutes felt like hours. The street was empty, the air thick with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car horn made John jump slightly. Then, in the distance, he saw flashing lights. The sheriff's car was turning onto his street. His heart raced. Karen, from her window, saw the flashing lights too. John noticed her expression change slightly, no longer smug, a flicker of worry appeared. He smirked faintly. Finally, she was about to face someone who wouldn't be swayed by her arrogance. The sheriff stepped out, professional and calm. John approached him, showing the photos and videos he had taken over the past few days. "This is what's been happening," John explained succinctly. "I've tried resolving it myself, but Karen refuses to move the trucks." The sheriff nodded, inspecting the scene. He looked at the trucks, then at John, then back at the trucks again. His tone was firm but fair. "These trucks are blocking private property. They need to be moved immediately." John felt a surge of relief and satisfaction. Finally, the law was on his side. But he also noticed Karen at her window, whispering angrily, plotting her next move. He knew this wouldn't be the end. As the sheriff started talking to Karen and directing the truck owners to move, John felt a strange mixture of triumph and anticipation. He had done everything right, documented, planned, and waited for authority to intervene. Yet, the audience can sense it, Karen is not defeated yet. She is cunning, stubborn, and unpredictable. The battle may have shifted, but it is far from over. And for John, the next moments will decide whether he truly wins or if Karen has one more trick hidden up her sleeve. The suspense hangs heavy in the air. Will the sheriff's intervention finally free John's garage, or will Karen somehow turn the tables again? The street was eerily silent except for the soft hum of the sheriff's car as it pulled to a stop in front of John's house. The flashing lights reflected off the white trucks, making them look even more imposing. John stood on the sidewalk, heart racing, adrenaline pumping. This was the moment that would decide everything. Karen appeared at her window again, her face tense for the first time. She had seen the sheriff arrive, and her confident smirk was gone. For the first time, doubt flickered across her expression. John noticed it, but he didn't relax. Karen was unpredictable, she could still try something. The sheriff stepped out of the car, tall, calm, and authoritative. His presence alone seemed to shift the energy on the street. He scanned the driveway, the trucks, and then John. "You called about a garage being blocked?" he asked. "Yes, sir," John said, holding his notebook and phone with photos and videos. 3 trucks have been blocking my garage for 2 days. I've tried talking to the HOA president, but she refuses to move them." The sheriff nodded and turned his attention to the trucks. He inspected the placement carefully, walked around them, checked the street, and finally looked up at Karen's window. "Are you aware these trucks are blocking private property?" he asked calmly but firmly. Karen's voice shook slightly. I was just enforcing neighborhood rules." He wasn't following. "Sir, ma'am," the sheriff interrupted, holding up a hand. "Rules or no rules, this is private property. Blocking access like this is not allowed. These trucks need to be moved immediately." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had planned, documented, and waited for this moment, and finally, the law was clearly on his side. Karen tried to argue, waving her arms, her face red with frustration. "But I'm the HOA president. This is..." The sheriff remained calm, unshaken. Being the HOA president does not give you the right to block someone's garage. Move the trucks now, or they will be towed. As the truck owners were called and the vehicles began to move, John could hardly believe his eyes. The blockade that had tormented him for days was finally being dismantled. Each truck slowly pulled away, leaving the driveway open. The tension in John's chest eased slightly, but he stayed alert. Karen's cunning could strike again. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some whispering to each other, others nodding in silent approval. John realized that the battle had not just been about his garage, it had been about standing up to someone who thought rules made her untouchable. Karen finally stepped back from her window, her shoulders slumping slightly. She had lost this round, but John could sense she was already planning her next move. Her eyes followed him as he walked to his now-free garage, a faint smirk forming despite her frustration. John parked his car for the first time in 3 days, savoring the small victory. He knew this was more than just a simple win, it was a statement. He had faced a difficult neighbor, stayed calm, documented everything, and finally called in the proper authority. Yet, as he looked up at Karen's house, he felt a shiver run down his spine. She was still there, watching, plotting. The street was quiet again, but the tension lingered. This victory was real, but it was fragile. The audience is left with a mix of relief and suspense. The trucks are gone, the sheriff has intervened, and John's garage is finally free, but Karen's presence looms like a shadow. What will she do next? And is John truly safe, or is this just the calm before the next storm? The sun had almost set, casting long, golden shadows across the quiet suburban street. John stood in front of his garage, finally able to open it without obstruction. The 3 trucks that had tormented him for days were gone, and the air felt lighter, almost like a weight had been lifted. But even in this moment of relief, John's mind was racing. Karen was nowhere in sight, at least for now. He had seen her at the window earlier, her eyes still sharp, still calculating. She had lost the battle today, but John knew better than to think she was defeated. Some part of him expected her to return with a new plan, a new trick, or another way to assert control over the neighborhood. John took a deep breath and walked into his garage, leaning against his car. The frustration and tension of the past days melted slightly, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. He had stayed calm, gathered evidence, and involved the proper authorities. He had faced a difficult neighbor and won legally and morally. Yet, the victory felt different than he had imagined. It wasn't about anger or revenge, it was about standing up for himself and protecting his own space. It was about showing that rules applied to everyone, even those who thought they were above them. As he looked around the now empty driveway, John noticed the subtle glances from neighbors. Some nodded quietly, others whispered to each other. For the first time in days, he felt supported, even if silently. His battle with Karen had reminded the whole street that courage and patience could overcome stubbornness. But John's mind was not at rest. He knew Karen was watching, somewhere, thinking, plotting. And maybe, just maybe, this was not the last chapter in their neighborhood saga. The thought didn't scare him, if anything, it sharpened his focus. He would be ready. Next time, if there was a next time, he would handle it even smarter, even more strategically. He smiled faintly, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. All this, for a garage, he muttered to himself. But beneath the humor was a lesson, clear and undeniable: patience, planning, and calm determination could turn the tide, even against someone seemingly impossible to deal with. The street fell quiet again, golden light fading into twilight. John walked into his house, shutting the door behind him, but his mind lingered outside. Karen's presence was still there, a reminder that challenges could come unexpectedly. But now he knew he could face them. And the audience is left with a lingering question: Karen may have lost today, but what is she planning next? And more importantly, will John be ready when the next challenge comes knocking? The story ends with a sense of relief, reflection, and subtle suspense, a perfect closing, yet leaving room for curiosity and anticipation for a potential next video.